Come on, Dix. It's time for another episode of FishingLocalWaters.com. Come on. Come on. Come on, get up. Well, welcome to another episode of FishingLocalWaters.com. I'm glad you decided to join us for another day. It's a beautiful early fall day and we're back on the Little Miami River. We were here before a few weeks ago and when we did the episode on the Loveland Castle. I fell in love with the Coral Ray access and I'm falling in love with the river. You know, in that episode we talked about how busy this was, and it was a Saturday afternoon, but I'm down here on a Wednesday, and I can tell you that I met one other fisherman, wonderful individual. We were fly fishing upstream from here, and just a beautiful day, and very little traffic whatsoever. But today what I want to do is I want to talk to you about the monkey bar. And in particular, I want to talk about Sam the chimp. But what I really want to talk about is the lawyer who represented Sam the chimp. And his name is Jim Sheets. So when we get back, we'll tell you all about why it's called the monkey bar, why there was a lawsuit, and the maneuvers that Jim Sheet used during that lawsuit. And we look forward to spending the day with you, and we look forward to bringing you another episode of FishingLocalWaters.com. Welcome to another episode of FishingLocalWaters.com. Remember, if you're fishing, you're almost always fishing in someone's local waters. So when on private land, talk to the owners and ask permission. And always be courteous and good stewards whenever you're on private or public properties. As a reminder, if you haven't already, please subscribe below. It helps us and allows us to keep you informed. As always, we hope you enjoy this segment of FishingLocalWaters.com. In the late 1980s, Sam, an adult male chimpanzee, almost became or did become the sitting president of the Humane Society of the United States. What follows is the amazing story on how Sam rose to this elevated position. 600 feet upstream from the Coral Ray access sits the Monkey Bar and Grill. Today's building looks nothing like the original structure that was first built in 1841 by James Foster. At this location, Mr. Foster built a mill and harnessed the Little Miami River for power. A hotel and tavern were also built adjacent to the Little Miami Railroad, the same railway that later became the Loveland Bike Trail. The tavern was called the 22 Mile Stand, and the hotel was called the Foster Inn or Foster's Hotel. Originally, the hotel had 3 stories with an addition on the backside closer to the river. The Foster Hotel was a perfect weekend getaway for Cincinnatians. In 1873, the pollution in the Cincinnati Basin had gotten so bad that the observatory and telescope, originally located in Mount Adams, had to be moved 5 miles out of town to Mount Lookout to get a clear view of the night sky. Getting out of the city and spending a weekend in fresh air in the countryside would have been in high demand. Most guests would arrive on Thursday or Friday after work and using the Little Miami Railroad. Most would leave on Sunday at 8 p.m. and return back to the city. There were 14 rooms for rent, and Teresa Inglet, who ran the establishment, had a reputation for setting a pretty good table and was known for her fried chicken, biscuits, and homemade pies. After dinner, the tavern remained open, and a card game was always available. A few guests would remain for the week, and the cycle would repeat itself the following weekend. By 1868, Foster had a population of 180 town folks. 105 were German, 50 were American, and 25 were Irish. Possibly the most significant resident of this town was Governor Jeremiah Morrow. He served 6 years in the United States Senate, 4 years as governor, and several years towards the close of his life as president of the Little Mammy Railroad Company. The locals knew each other, understood and embraced the local culture, and everyone else was referred to as out-of-towners. The locals were as tough as the Foster Hotel. In 1913, a flood rammed the log right through the middle of the building. The building burned in 1975, and then again in 1979, and more recently in May of 2023. And each time, the building was repaired and modified to adapt to the current business environment. By 1945, the Little Miami Railroad was beginning to decline, and freight only traveled on the old rail lines. The out-of-towners that once came to Foster were traveling by automobile to newer destinations. On April 29, 1972, the Kings Island Amusement Park, which is located just 3 miles up the hill from Foster, opened. And then 4 years later, on July 29, 1976, the Penn Central Railroad officially abandons the Little Miami Railroad line. The old Foster Hotel was now called the Train Stop Inn, and in 1979, Ken Harris purchased the bar from his brother, Joe Roy Harris. In 1984, the old Miami Railroad line was being converted into the Loveland Bike Trail, and once again, out-of-towners were now dressed in spandex and coming back down the trail towards Foster. Foster remained a small river town off the beaten path where everyone knew each other. They believed in the right of privacy, lent a hand when needed, but respected and expected self-reliance. The Train Stop Inn catered to the local motorcycle clubs and other locals. The beer was cold and the fish sandwiches were delicious. Private matters often got settled, and when they didn't, the police were called, which no one wanted. In 1985, Ken Harris became the owner of a chimpanzee named Sam. Some stories say that Sam was won in a poker game, and others say that Sam was first owned by a local individual who rented canoes and came to Ken after Sam bit the owner's hand. Most of the stories agree that Sam and another chimpanzee named Rudy originated from a carnival that went bankrupt and was abandoned in Boone County, Kentucky. Rudy spent 2 years with another family in Foster and then found a home at a rescue organization named Primarily Primates. Sam remained with Ken Harris. Harris kept Sam at the bar, and at times he mingled with the customer. Sam was known to smoke cigarettes and drink beer, which seemed to endear Sam to the patrons. Sam did have an outdoor cage beside the bar and in clear view of the Loveland Bike Trail, and as a primate, he did have a habit of pleasuring himself when the need occurred. I can just imagine an out-of-towner jogging the newly opened Loveland Bike Trail and stumbling upon a local biker bar and Sam smoking a cigarette after a day of fun in the sun. Now it appears that the Humane Society of the United States did not see the humor in such antics, and in the summer of 1987, they accused Ken Harris of animal cruelty and used the courts to seize Sam and place him in an animal facility at Ohio State University. That's when Jim Sheets, a local attorney out of Lebanon, Ohio, got a phone call. "Jim, they took my monkey," Ken said. And that started the media circus that was about to unfold and launch Sam towards becoming the president of the Humane Society of the United States. The Humane Society of the United States is not a government agency of the United States. It is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation headquarters in Washington, D.C. And it appears that it didn't take the history and the local culture into consideration when they waded in and seized Ken's monkey. From the Humane Society's viewpoint, this was an open-shut case of animal cruelty, and perhaps this blinded them from seeing the local viewpoints. For many of the locals, this was more about outsiders invading Ken's privacy, stealing something he owned, and trying to inflict their righteous point of view into a culture the outsiders knew little about. For if they did, the outsider would have been courteous and polite and ask permission.
This is Terry Jessup in Warren County, where a jury will decide the future home of a beer-drinking, cigarette-smoking chimp named Sam. Sam has lived in a cage outside a Foster, Ohio bar for 4 years now. Owner Ken Harris even provided Sam with a television and a space heater. But back in April, Sam was seized on a cruelty to animals complaint and moved to an OSU animal lab in Columbus.
I've been up there once a week to see him, and Sam's not happy up there.
The day Sam was picked up, there were a bag of monkey chow on their premises. He is fed, and there are approximately, I would say, 2,500 people in the neighborhood that could testify to that.
The U.S. Humane Society complained that Sam was kept in a cistern-like structure, often littered with body waste and debris. Some animal activists have wanted him moved for 2 years now. Harris says they just don't understand.
He's just like a kid to me. I mean, he's just like one in the family. That's the way I feel about him.
Harris's trial begins tomorrow.
After meeting with Ken, one of Jim Sheets' first move was to get a court order to visit Sam. Ken Harris took clean clothes for Sam and some of his favorite foods. Another individual brought Susie, a young female chimpanzee dressed to the T and whose owners claimed she was Sam's girlfriend. The press had a field day, and now the reports were that Sam, the cigarette-smoking, beer-drinking chimpanzee, was taken away from his home at a biker's bar and held naked and alone in solitary confinement by the Humane Society at The Ohio State University and was denied visitation privileges with his girlfriend. A defense fund was organized that included tip jars distributed around town and a photo of a well-endowed lady and a caption that read, "Don't mess with my monkey." Witnesses were identified to testify on behalf of Ken and Sam, and they included members of the local motorcycle clubs. An inflatable rubber ape or apes were purchased, and they began to appear around town on the back of given motorcycles. And Sam's cage was enlarged and now included a television, a radio, a couch, and yes, a well-stocked refrigerator. The AP wire had picked up on the story, and Jim Sheets was getting calls from as far away as Australia. Gary Burbank, a very popular 700 WLW radio host, invited Jim Sheets to his show to give updates on Sam and the trial. As the media circus grew, Jim Sheets stood in the middle conducting the show, much to the dismay and disgruntlement of the Humane Society of the United States. I'm sure they felt a mockery was being made of their serious attempts to save Sam. Jim Sheets was winning the public opinion game, and he had prepared a pretty good legal defense. However, he had one more ace in his hand. While preparing for trial, Jim proclaims he discovered the Humane Society of the United States had allowed their corporate name to go beyond the annual renewal date. He immediately filed paperwork for the name and established his own incorporation using the now available Humane Society of the United States name, on which he placed Ken Harris on the board of directors and named Sam the president. If the Humane Society of the United States wanted to get their name back, they were going to have to get permission from Ken Harris and Sam the chimp, who was now president and in solitary confinement at Ohio State University. The trial was held on Friday and Saturday. Following 9 hours of testimony, the jury deliberated for about 90 minutes late Saturday night, and on June 13, 1987, they found Ken Harris not guilty of animal cruelty and mandated that Sam be returned. On July 11, 1987, Sam was returned to his home in Foster, Ohio. Suits and countersuits continued until February of 1988, when both parties announced a settlement, but no details. We're guessing that Sam did resign as president of the Humane Society of the United States. Jane Goodall, who spent a lifetime studying chimpanzees, visited the bar after the return of Sam and mentioned her observations in a book titled Visions of Caliban. In her account, she refuses to mention Jim Sheets' name and only refers to him as the lawyer. In 1987, Ken Harris took Sam away from the bar and never publicly disclosed where he sent the 25-year-old chimp. Ken later passed in 2013. On April the 22nd, 2020, Jim Sheets was interviewed by Cincy Shirts in a 58-minute podcast and gives more details behind the story. We have included a link to the podcast in the description field below. In closing, let me thank you once again for watching another episode of FishingLocalWaters.com, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Until then, we ask that you remember, if you're fishing, you're almost always fishing in someone's local waters.